Hello. In this video, I'd like to talk about my Aerox 3 wireless. This is the Onyx version, so it came out in 2022, and I like to talk about what I like about the mouse and what I don't like, and some of the mods I've done to make it a better mouse for me to use. The first thing I like to comment on is the sensor is located a bit far back compared to other mice. I also had a better time adjusting because I came from the G303, which have a very similar sensor placement. However, for those who came from mice that has a more centered sensor, like the G Pro or the G305, might need some time for adjustment. And what they could also try to do is to increase their sensitivity or DPI to compensate. One thing I will be complaining about are the switches on my Aerox 3. The TTC Gold switches are very good for the first couple of months. Afterwards, because of the clicks tend to resonate with a higher pitch, it definitely annoyed me. I suspect it might be an issue with acoustics, as the Aerox 5, which is a bigger mouse, has more plastic surrounding the left-right button switches, doesn't seem to have the same issue. Also, the paddle doesn't have a separate spacer, it's just one plastic piece, which I'll show you in the upcoming clip. Unlike the G Pro X Superlight or the Ajas AJ199, there isn't much for me to swap for a different kind of click feel. One other thing is that the paddle creaks after pressing it hard enough, however the creaking is totally fixable with just a little bit of lubrication. I personally use Vaseline as it has a similar consistency as bearing grease. Lubricate the cavity where the main chassis paddle guide goes into, and avoid Vaseline on the plunger in itself. Also lubricate the tab that connects the paddle to the chassis, and at the end, I would also try to lubricate the two holes which stabilizes the paddle within the shell. The melting point of petroleum jelly begins at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I can be pretty confident that the jelly won't melt and seep into my switches. Now, on to battery life. My copy doesn't last 200 hours gaming, and I know it's advertised as such, but it's not exactly true. That 200 hours are advertised to last roughly how long if you were to use the Aerox 3 via Bluetooth. For my copy, I would use it for gaming, and it would last me for roughly 25 to 30 hours with 1000 Hz polling rate and RGB off, and roughly 7 to 8 hours with 1000 Hz polling rate with RGB on full blast. So for my personal setup, I'm currently using a 165 Hz monitor, and I can definitely feel that the Aerox 3 behave just a tiny bit sluggish compared to my G Pro X Superlight and Viper V2 Pro. This mouse uses the SteelSeries TrueMove Air, which is a modified version of Pixar's 3335. Although the Aerox 3 is using a sensor 2 generations behind, I still think SteelSeries did a pretty good job at implementing the sensor into this mouse. From a repairman's perspective, I think it's very easy to take apart. That's one thing I do appreciate about my Aerox 3. Underneath it, it's just 4 T5 Torx screws, and the whole shell pops right off. I would recommend using a spludge tool for the first disassembly, since there is a catch in front and in front of the USB-C port. As you can see here, I kept my TTC Gold switches as a souvenir because despite it being bad on the Aerox 3 wireless in my opinion, I do feel that it's a premium micro switch for its tactility and longevity. Now, in this video, I'd like to add one more thing users can do to make their Aerox 3 lighter. By removing the diffuser, users can effectively save up to 7 grams of weight, making the mice go from 66 grams to 58 grams. There will be a space in between the mouse, but when gaming, I personally couldn't feel the gap due to the way I hold my mouse. But definitely keep in mind that you will need a 1mm spacer in between the rear screw insertion columns and the base plate. If not, the angle of the front screw insertion columns will constantly be flexed on. And while I personally have done it in the past, I could definitely feel the top shell flexing, especially in the rear, when putting everything back together. Ultimately, I can't say that these can be good for plastic, especially if it's a pretty essential part like the screw insertion columns. I think it's always better to be safe than sorry and find or make your own 1mm spacer. And that's all I have about the Aerox 3 wireless. Despite its lower performance, it is still one of my favorite mouse. Thank you guys for watching my video, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.